Suits joins us on a Thursday. First of all, you look fine after the Grey Cup. What a display of Canadian football, and a great job done by the organizing committee. It looked sensational.
Yeah, it really was. Some of the numbers are coming in. You saw that there were 10 million unique viewers to the championship, which is now why I understand why I get the butterflies before the Grey Cup after doing well over 1,000 games. And I look at when I walk around the field, 2 days before the game, and I look at 3 or 4 trucks when in the regular season we have one. I look at all the cameras, which is 3 times the number that we have when we do a game in the regular season. And it's hard not to get caught up in it and think, this is a big show. This is a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
and then you have to kind of separate yourself from that, or else you'll lose your mind. So, you got to go back to, but it's just a game, and you're going to just try to enhance the game. So haven't looked back at yet, Dave. I don't know how long you wait till you listen back to some games and try to do some self-scouting. I usually wait a couple of weeks, and I will certainly do that this time. But from all indications from producers and stuff, they're pretty happy with the show. And, the game was a one-possession game going into the fourth quarter. And as a TV show, that's what we look for.
Okay, can you give me the insight on you? Because obviously the preparation and for your analysis that you do week to week is outstanding, because the insights you have, I'm like, why couldn't I have figured that out? But in saying that, I can't see you doing any more preparation or different preparation for the game and the Grey Cup. Would your approach change at all then with the different way that it's being presented?
It doesn't change, but because there's so much more time, I find myself stacking facts and digging deeper into each player. I mean, you can start to look into bowl games from 5 years ago for some guys, and then all of a sudden go, I've been covering this player for 3 years, and I didn't realize he had 189 yards in the Sugar Bowl or whatever it was. And then you go back and you spend an hour looking at that, and then you make some notes on that, thinking, there might be an aspect of this because he makes a nice one-hand catch. If he does it again in the Grey Cup, maybe I could bring it up and we could roll in. So that's a call to a video guy at TSN to say, hey, could you find this Sugar Bowl play back? So when you start to do that, because you only have 2 teams and you have the whole week to get ready for it, you start to go, my chart starts to look completely swamped with information, which can actually be detrimental to just relaxing and letting the game tell the story. That's what I always have to remind myself. I'm sure you do the same thing. It's not us in the booth. It's not even me creating storylines or anything like that. The game itself will tell the story. We just have to fill in some details and add some perspective and ideas from experience.
So over or under 3 video guys at TSN that see your number come up and have got you blocked. I do not want to find something from 2004.
Hey, sometimes I do it like 2 hours before the game, and you should see the look I get on that one. But you know what? They always come through, because our crew is so passionate about the game. It's the above and beyond, because they love it. They love the game, and they'll go dig into the archives and go on YouTube and all the different ways they have to copy that and get it to an actual usable form in the game. I'm not even sure of all the steps, but they're the best in the business.
All right. We had an opportunity to talk to Jeremy O'Day today down at Mosaic Stadium. Ryan Rigmaiden was named the new general manager out in British Columbia. We've been talking trades throughout the show with the big one done by the Regina Pats today, but there's a guaranteed one coming from BC. Apparently, Mr. O'Day hasn't received a call from his colleague in BC just yet, but is this strange coming right out and saying, yeah, we're trading Vernon Adams?
I don't, it's different. No question. And I found both Ryan Rigmaiden's first press conference and Ed Hervey's first press conference in Edmonton very interesting in how let's say, edgy they were in being honest and transparent and open. And Rick Maiden saying, yeah, we're going to trade Vernon Adams. Like, and yeah, I remember back to Mark Trestman and what was his name? Not James Franklin. He was a quarterback that was the up and comer in Edmonton that everyone thought was going to be the next guy. Mm-hmm. And he ended up in Toronto with Mark Trestman and Ricky Ray. And on the phone call, the press said, when is he going to become the starting quarterback? When are you going to mention that? And he said, whoa, Ricky Ray's our starting quarterback. The other kids on our roster are going to have to make the team first. Then they move into the number 2 spot, and that's where they sit. Well, our quarterback runs our team. And that press conference alone, I guarantee Ricky Ray heard, and it empowered him to be the leader of that team. That year was the 100th Grey Cup that the Argos won. And I think about it was the Grey Cup they won in Ottawa, not the 100th. But it was the thought being that Rick Maiden is saying Nathan Rourke's our quarterback. And Nathan will have heard that through this announcement that VA will be traded. So there's no speculation, there's no issues. And I also thought it was very interesting that he said, and Vernon Adams won't have a say in where he's traded. We will do what's best for the organization. I love Vernon Adams. A lot of people do. I'm one of them. I'm top of that list. I've sang his praises every time we've done a game. I think he's a fantastic leader. But I think it's great for everybody involved, including the quarterbacks, to be clear and concise. Let them know that this is the direction we're going. And you're going to give now Nathan Rourke a chance to take that responsibility, formulate his plan for the offseason, and get ready to lead a football team in Vancouver. And wherever VA lands, maybe Calgary, who knows? Edmonton might be, a consideration. And the only reason I say Calgary, I'm not saying it from inside information, Dave. I'm saying it more from just reading tea leaves, is that with Calgary moving on at quarterback, VA doesn't want to, I don't think, go too far away from Washington. I think he'd love to stay in the West. He'd love to stay as close to Vancouver as he could. And there's some interesting coaching dynamics in Calgary that might work well for VA.
So having said that, as an athlete, as a broadcaster, as you name the business you're in, you always want to operate from a position of strength, correct? So you mentioned it, and I'm bang on, right? So you're helping out your athletes, you're helping out the organization. Everybody knows which direction you're going in, but haven't you also hamstrung yourselves a little bit, saying, okay, we are moving this guy, which basically everybody knew anyways, but are you still dealing with or from a position of strength when it comes to trying to get the most in return for the asset you want to move?
I don't think so, really. And the reason I say it is because I think most of the teams in the league knew that was happening anyway. I mean, they'll take. It'll depend on how many teams. The competition comes and how many teams will be interested in Vernon Adams. That's going to be what dictates sort of what the Lions can get in return. It really has nothing to do with some sort of mysterious secret as to which guy they might be moving, Nathan Rourke or VA. And I think everybody in the league knew it was going to be Vernon Adams, including Vernon Adams. So this just cleared it up completely. And it basically said to all the other teams that might be interested, give us your best offer. We're moving Vernon Adams. I don't think there's a problem. I don't think you play games with that, especially when you're dealing with people's lives. I mean, Vernon Adams knows he's got to be prepared to move. And I think I just saw him on Twitter. There was a lady on Twitter that was saying she needed a ball signed or something for a charity. Again, more work that VA does. He said absolutely he'd do it because he's coming to Vancouver to gather up some stuff in about a month. So again, little tea leaves there that he's coming to gather up his stuff. He knows he's moving. Everybody is clear on what's going to happen.
Well, there was more pivotal talk a little further east from Vancouver, and I don't know about you, but if I just got hired for a new job, I'm not sure that I would say that my employer is a laughing stock, but that's what Ed Hervey did when he was announced as the general manager of the Edmonton Elks, and he's got a quarterback pivotal decision to make as well.
Yeah, I loved it. I really did. I mean, Ed Hervey was saying what everyone's been thinking for a year and a half, 2 years, and maybe even before that. Like, they had become that. They couldn't win a game. They started seasons 0-9 and 0-7. And the way they were mishandling their quarterback situation, waiting till 0-9 before they decided maybe we should try something different at quarterback, and waiting till they're 0-7 to do the same. He was also asked, and this was important, Barney and I talked about it on Tuesday, the first question, or one of the first, was, what about Trey Ford? And it was a very interesting answer because he was honest there as well. Ed Hervey saying he's a dynamic player. He's a player that scares you when he starts running around. And I don't know him well personally, so that's what we're going to do over the next little while. We're going to get to know each other. He wants to hear from Trey himself as to what's gone on in Edmonton. And I can tell you that's going to be a very revealing discussion. That I know for a fact. I won't go any deeper into it than that. But that will be a very interesting discussion when Trey Ford talks about how he's felt with what's gone on over the last couple of years there. And I also thought it was interesting that Hervey finally said sort of, hey, if we can find that common ground, and in other words, he's saying, I'm not just going to let Trey Ford dictate how I feel about it. I'm going to wait, listen to him. Then he's going to hear my expectations. And then if we can come together somewhere, we give this kid a good opportunity to compete for the starting job in Edmonton. That's all Trey Ford's ever wanted. And I think he deserves the right to, from what we've seen so far in small sample sizes, he deserves that. He deserves it. And he's a dynamic guy. Forget the Canadian part, which is obviously great for selling tickets, but forget that. Just as an athlete, this kid is special.
Glen Suitor joins us, and Suits, before we leave talking about Edmonton, I do have to throw a little curveball your way. There's a lady named Teresa, works at Mosaic Stadium, and she asked me a question, and I actually said that I would forward it along to you. So here's us doing it over sportscage.com or on the radio. Her question pertained to Ed Hervey, who was an employee in Hamilton. How was he able to leave Hamilton for what would seem to be a horizontal move as the GM in Hamilton to the Edmonton Elks organization?
Well, there's no hard, fast rule. I think, every organization would have their own sort of way to handle something like that, to give a person or a player, how many times have we seen a player that may get an NFL opportunity that may be in the middle of his contract? I know there's some teams that sort of have an official way to do that. Some teams that'll just say, no, we would let a guy go and do that. If he had a chance to make life-changing money doing the exact same thing he's doing up here, why would we hold him back from getting that opportunity? I think once you see lots of movement in that, that's why league rules come in when it comes to players. In other words, they'll say he is still the team's property if he goes down to the NFL. I think there's something to be said for doing that. But it could be as simple as the organization looking at Ed and saying, look, that's where you used to play. This is an opportunity to be in charge of the team, to run the team the way you want to run it, through all the life lessons that he's had since the first time he was in Edmonton, and evolving the way he's evolved. I thought he was interesting in how he described that too. He goes, I'm really, really fiery, but I'm much more calm. and I understood what he was saying, but it was just funny how he said it, because he was saying, listen, I'm not going to put up with we're going to just try and make the playoffs and things like that. He was talking about this team. You're either going to fit in this team with this culture that I know of, or you're going to be gone. And I don't care how good of a player you are on the field. I thought that was very revealing. And then he also wanted to let us know that he's not the guy who's going to lose his temper in a press conference or on the field or something like that. He has evolved from, the early days that we saw a little of that. So, yeah, I think to answer the question is basically, it could be as simple as an organization saying, look, this is a really good opportunity for you. Forget your contract. We'll rip that up. You go ahead and sign over there, and good luck to you. I mean, it can be as simple as that.
Okay, we've talked about Trey Ford. We mentioned Vernon Adams Jr. The other domino that may be set to fall is Montreal, where they have to essentially make a decision, it sounds like, between Cody Fajardo and Davis Alexander. Is that maybe one of the biggest pieces that have to fall in the postseason before everything else sorts its way out? And we haven't mentioned that Trevor Harris also is a free agent coming, and Jeremy O'Day talked about how much he loves having Trevor Harris around this organization. There's a lot to consider, but again, back to Davis Alexander. Is he the next kind of big chip that has to fall somewhere?
Well, I would say that there are, I'm not sure that Montreal will want to have both of those guys and have to deal with the weekly questions. If, let's say they start out slowly offensively and then all the questions come up. I think BC was an example of how that can go a little sideways on you with Nathan Rourke and Vernon Adams once he was healthy. So I think they're going to try to avoid that. So they have to make that tough decision, and I get it. That once that decision is made, then it opens it up for teams to know what they might be going after, even if it's Cody Fajardo for that matter.
Yeah.
But I think there's risk in both of these things. Let's go to Saskatchewan for a second. You know what you have in Trevor Harris, and by the way, I'm going to add this. The back half of the season when Trevor Harris returned from injury, the first 5 games, he wasn't completely right physically. And he gutted it out and got through it. I won't say on one leg because he was rehabbing and it was getting better every week. But it wasn't quite right for a good portion of the back half of the season, and he still played great. You know what you have in Trevor Harris for sure, which is a potential to win a championship. If you have a team around him and keep him healthy, you have a chance. Now, the downside there is he's 38 and the injuries play a factor. But you have downside in Davis Alexander too, because he hasn't done it through a full season. There's a huge unknown there. And I think Davis Alexander is going to be a great player in the league, as I do with Nathan Rourke, as I do with Trey Ford. But until we know, we don't know really. And they have to go and put a whole season together, highs and lows, wins and losses, 4 interception games with 4 touchdown games, make sure they weather all of those storms and come out of the other end ready to compete in the playoffs and go after a cup. If once they do that, you can get a better grasp for what your risk and reward is with these players. But I think what we do sometimes is we get really attracted to the new shiny object.
Yeah.
And we start to think, Trevor's getting old and maybe we want the new shiny object. I would say, there's pros and cons with both. Don't get me wrong. But, man, Trevor Harris, I would be very reluctant to go crazy finding a guy that hasn't really done it yet and take that chance when you have Trevor Harris in your room. Not to mention all the stuff that he can do off the field for you as a leader in the locker room and bringing that group together.
So maybe take me behind the scenes of the TSN production once again. I don't know if there was a wrap-up or a pregame meal or anything, but did you sit beside Bo Levi Mitchell and, hey, Bo, where are you playing next year?
I can't remember if he was allowing me to say this or not, so I'll just say it. I did ask Bo, but I didn't ask him where. I said, "Are you playing next year? Are you going to play next year?" And he goes, "Absolutely." So he's going to play, and the way he played in the back half of the season, finally understanding what Scott Milenovich was actually looking for, and them actually getting on the same page. I think once that happened, we saw the potential of that offense. I'd be shocked if he's anywhere else than Hamilton.
One more quarterback question that I want to throw your way then. Nobody's talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson. He had amazing numbers. The only number that he didn't have was the big one that counts, right? He didn't have the wins. Should we be talking about him next year?
I think he could be a piece. As a, with his age and that he has been such a journeyman. I mean, when we're talking about Bo and we're talking about McLeod Bethel Thompson, those are two very different categories. One guy is going automatically into the Hall of Fame, MOPs, MVPs of Grey Cups, champions, rings. The other guy has put up good numbers and played on a ton of teams. And I'm not disparaging McLeod Bethel Thompson. I think he's been very good for a lot of organizations, not only in Canada, but across the U.S. But to make him your guy to start the season at his age, I don't know. You can be young and up and down with a high ceiling of potential. I'm not sure you can be 38 and up and down, or what is McLeod? I think he's 38, 39, and up and down.
36.
36. Okay.
36,
I aged him a little bit. I was thinking Trevor Harris age, but I mean, Trevor Harris, again, we know Trevor Harris can get a team to the championship. We know Trevor Harris knows what it looks like to win a championship on a roster. And we saw how he can compete at his age and what he does off the field. That stuff is not in question. I think with McLeod Bethel Thompson, it's a different discussion completely. I think he could be a piece somewhere to help someone, but not in the way that Edmonton did it last year, where they just, after what Trey Ford did the year before to actually save some jobs and then just bench him and say, this 36-year-old, 35-year-old is going to come in and just be the starter. I think that was, well, we saw the results.
Okay, before we let you go, Glenn, if as evidenced by my fantasy football team, I should be nowhere considered a general manager or any type of management position in any kind of sport ever. But if you got to be a general manager, you've assessed the positions for the Saskatchewan Roughriders moving forward, which is what Jeremy O'Day, Corey Mace, Kyle Carson, the rest of the crew are doing right now at Mosaic Stadium. What are you looking at?
I'm looking at how the Argos beat the Bombers 3 times last year. And I'm building my team very similar to that. I really am. They have a quarterback. They have some great receivers. They have some excellent Canadian talent. I would be looking at the D-line and stacking the heck out of that. And I'm not talking about the top 4. I'm talking about the top 7. 7 D-linemen on your roster in rotation, all of which could be all-stars. Now, that's easy to wave a wand and say that's what I want. A little harder to go find that. But in free agency or wherever it may be, find the best 6 or 7 D linemen you can possibly find, build it that way, make them very physical on the line of scrimmage and hard for any quarterback, including the Bombers, because let's be honest, that is still the team. If you want to get to the Grey Cup out of the West, you got to be Winnipeg. Before, back in the day, it was Calgary and Doug Flutie. Now it's Winnipeg. And it still probably will be coming out of training camp next year. So that's how I would be looking at it in free. Well, we'll talk a lot about free agency as we get closer and closer, Dave. But, to get more specific, but look at the Toronto model, how they built their team, and build your team very similar. That's what I'd be looking at.
All right, Glen Suitor. Hey, you know what? The Regina Pats made a big trade today. We've been talking about memorable trades. Of course, in Riderville, Ronnie, of course, was acquired by trade. Darian Durant acquired by trade. In Vancouver, the Canucks made the biggest blunder of all time, getting rid of Cam Neely and even trading Trevor Linden. Any memorable trade that sticks out in your mind back in the day ever? Or from ever?
I used to, as a kid, I used to sort of like the Canucks. I certainly watched them a little bit. I'm a hockey fan like every Canadian. And when they traded Trevor Linden, that was it. I was done. I was a free agent as far as my fandom for an NHL team. It turned out to be the Nashville Predators because my son went down to Nashville in school. And I went to a bunch of Predators games, which were honestly $20 right on the top of Broadway. It was awesome to go to see the NHL in prime seats with Tim McGraw playing in between periods. It was crazy. But it became the Predators because of that trade. Trevor Linden was the heart and soul of this team in Vancouver. I don't know. That was awful.
Glenn, love the insight as always. Take care. Again, terrific job on the Grey Cup broadcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.